Welcome to the Thoughtful Software Podcast. On this show, your hosts, Fahad and Andrew, discuss emerging technologies, interview industry experts, and share their insights on how to build incredible software. Ultimately, Thoughtful Software is all about helping people be better at what they do. We believe thoughtful people and thoughtful software can change the world for the better. Join our Insights newsletter at skiplist.com to be the first to receive our latest podcasts and in-house articles. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Today on the Thoughtful Software Podcast, we're discussing the latest Apple announcement with one of our Senior Skiplist developers, Josh Smith. Josh is an industry veteran, accomplished speaker, and a published author. We are so excited to have him on the show today. In this episode, Andrew, Fahad, and Josh are sharing their reactions to Apple's newly announced products, discussing the state of iOS, and what they believe is coming down the pipeline in the software field. It's a unique take on Apple's special event from software veterans that you won't find anywhere else. Here we go.
So let's just kick this off. Josh, you're a senior developer at Skiplist, so welcome to the podcast. This is your first time, and happy to have you on. Why don't you maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you got involved with iOS and like Mac development.
Yeah, so I've been a developer and sysadmin for a long time, but I was working for a web game company after the iPhone came out, but before the iPad came out, and the rumor was the iPad was going to be a big deal, and the game development company said, hey, we should probably write games in this. And I had experience with C, and I had some experience with OpenStep on Solaris, and Objective-C was familiar to me. And so I said, well, I'll do that. And they said, that's great, you do that. And we did that. So I wrote a couple of games, and I found that the development environment in iOS was really pretty spectacular, spectacularly nice. At least, particularly at the time I was doing Rails, and I missed having a debugger. But the problem with writing games for iOS is that there's not a lot of money in it, and I left the game development company, and they left iOS game development, and I stayed in with iOS development. And especially during that time, it was a good time to be there. I learned a lot. There were a lot of changes. And then Swift came along, and right around through that time, I taught game development. I ran a boutique consultancy with a friend of mine. We wrote a book about iOS game development using SpriteKit. We taught classes and wrote apps, and it was a good time.
Did you write a book too, right?
Yeah. It's out of print, and it covers SpriteKit 1, which is now getting much older than I'm comfortable acknowledging. And SpriteKit was really a game. SpriteKit.
And how long have you been in software development?
Oh, in software development?
Yeah.
Long time, 25 years.
Okay, cool.
Ish.
We have developers with less life years than you have.
Yeah, I know. Don't remind me. It bums me out immensely when some of my teammates, when I will make comments and some of my teammates will mention, that was, they were 4 when that happened. And I'm thinking I was,
not 4.
I was not 4.
Or like Dragnet references. Those are fun.
You heard about that?
I heard.
Yeah, the Dragnet reference. That was a difficult one to explain, especially the whole idea that the police used to be considered good. The millennials in the room really had a tough time with that whole discussion.
Did you get a chance to take a look at the keynote yesterday? I mean, the timing of this podcast to talk about like iOS and Apple is no coincidence. Yesterday they had their big keynote. Did you have a chance to take a look? And what did you, if you did, what did you like about it?
I did. I always watch all the. I always watch all of it. I mean, the new iPhone 11 Pro Max with 4 cameras. There's a lot of words there. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, I've never been a fan person of Apple in the sense that I never was like felt that their technology was an essential component of my life. I mean, I respect Apple as an organization that can build products. I mean, it's amazing, and their engineering side is really amazing. Like the SDKs, the software development experience and developer ergonomics in Cocoa development and iOS development is really, really fantastic. And there's not, I can't think of another system. The new Flutter stuff comes close, but there isn't another system that is as integrated and as complete and as well thought out end to end as Apple's developer ecosystem. And I know a lot of people, they give Xcode, but their APIs are very well thought out. Like when you're working, as long as you stay inside, as long as you color inside the lines, it's fabulous.
That's what I love about Apple. I mean, it's like at my age, I just need shit to work, right? And everything, for the most part, works. And okay, that's the simplest reason why I love Apple. Just everything works.
Yeah, like I said, I don't really love them, but I often will say, we live in the Garden of Stephen, and we use the tools that Stephen hath given. Otherwise, we get kicked out of the garden, and nobody wants to get kicked out of the garden. I hear from certain stories that that's a bad deal. But you were going to say something, Andrew.
No, the interesting thing is it used to be Apple was a couple of years behind Android. You didn't get NFC for 2 or 3 years afterwards, but then it came with Apple Pay, and everything had Apple Pay because everyone had an iPhone. So you're willing to wait for innovation and technological advances. I think yesterday's keynote kind of has me shook a little bit, because it just doesn't seem like they're going to push the same boundaries that they did under Steve Jobs in the Garden of Jobs, or in the Garden of Steve, as you put it. I just don't think that, and I respect Tim Cook a lot, right? But he reminds me of Ballmer. And that's not an insult. I respect Ballmer a whole lot, even if other developers don't. I think Ballmer did. I mean, look at the growth of Microsoft while I was there. Even though the stock was stagnant, their market cap grew significantly and empowered someone like Satya to take over. I think Tim Cook should probably step aside for someone like Satya. And I know they have people at Apple like that, people that could come in and really change the culture and have a product mindset rather than a supply chain mindset. Like, I don't know what they even did yesterday. Made the battery bigger and attached another camera. Like, it's not innovative. And you look at what's happening Android ecosystem, and it's kind of like, am I getting a worse and worse phone every year while Android's getting steadily better? Are they going to start losing market share because of that?
No,
it's a different time though. It's a different time though, because like in Steve Jobs' time, they introduced like touch, using your finger, and that was like revolutionary. And smartphone penetration wasn't as much as it is today. So it's like what else can they do?
Well,
maybe 5G. AR, I don't know.
It's not.
Fahad, go ahead.
I'm going to cut you off, Andrew, because it's not mature. But I think that one of the things that's important to remember is that Apple only got to where they are not because of Steve Jobs, but because of people, and specifically Tim Cook, who, when Steve Jobs would say something, the similarity is there's a story. This guy, he's the president of a new country, and he stands up and he says, you know what? We're going to have 80,000 troops on the border, defending our new land. And the guy behind him makes a note and says, find 80,000 pairs of boots. Steve Jobs was the guy who would say, let's do this. But it was the Tim Cooks of the organization who found the boots.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I compare him to Ballmer. Like, don't get me wrong.
No, see, that's where I disagree. I don't think Ballmer was the guy that found the boots. I think Ballmer was more of just like, I hate to say henchman. But
he's a thug, man.
Yeah. But he wasn't finding the boots. He was beating people into submission.
Into finding the boots.
Yeah, find the boots. But no, Tim Cook, I mean, I don't think Tim Cook should step down, because I think Tim Cook is the reason why Apple is so successful, not the barrier to them being successful. I mean,
so just to clarify, I actually think he should still be heading up their supply chain. I think he's a wizard, and he may be the best at that in the world. And to get rid of, like, Ballmer should have stepped down and left the company. Like, enough people hated him. I think Tim Cook's really well respected, and I think he could still do wonders there. I don't know. I wonder what Apple would look like with a more product-minded person instead of an operations-minded person.
I think they wouldn't. So one of the things about this product announcement that's important to note is the A13 Bionic GPU and the Metal API changes they're very technical, and they're not like, that's not what they spent a lot of time talking about, but those are the reasons why Apple is where they are from a product perspective. And you can't separate the supply chain from stuff like that. Their custom silicon is amazing. And I don't mean like slightly amazing. I mean, like, it is amazing. I wish,
Oh, yeah.
I know, but you can't separate, like, you need Tim Cook in charge to keep that going, so that when you get to the A20 Super Bionic, and that it runs on 4 watts and has just a ridiculous amount of everything, those are the reasons why Apple is successful. I agree with you that the announcements were underwhelming in a lot of ways, and somewhat concerning, because 4 cameras.
I loved it, man. I need 5.
Well, we found their target audience. It's Fahad. It's actually, on the CPU side, since it's a technology podcast, let's geek out on that. It takes a lot for someone like Apple, and I know Apple knows hardware, and they know CPUs really well, and they have the talent, but to come into a space where they really had no experience, and in a couple short years outcompete Snapdragon, Intel, and everyone else in the space by not just like 10% or 5% or 15%, like 50 to 75% year over year in improvements, is just insanity. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a company come in and be like, you know what, we're going to own the space, and then own it that hard. It's because if they started selling those chips on the market, they really wanted to make another product line out of it, and they didn't want it to be a differentiator for their phones. I mean, who would buy a Snapdragon? Who would go buy, I don't think Intel's in mobile anymore, but who would go buy a competitor? You wouldn't. You would just go to Apple, and they would kill those other companies in, just incredible ways. I've never seen anything like it. To your point, supply chain matters, but the people they've hired to run that division are, probably the best in the world at this point.
Oh, they are, and I think also that's one of the things that's why I was concerned about their announcement. So their internal silicon is the result of an acquisition, not an internal project. Apple can't build technology by itself. It acquires it. A good example is the Microsoft's what's their AR thing called?
Oh, HoloLens.
HoloLens is 100% in-house developed by Microsoft. Apple can't do that. Apple can acquire things, and because they can only acquire things, that's also why Tim Cook is so important. Because they can only build via acquisition, and it's amazing. Yeah. Their chips are amazing. Their chips are also more amazing because they're not selling them, because their internal teams have access to things about the chip that nobody else has. The degree of integration of operating system and chips and boards is the biggest thing. Because they showed in their keynote, they showed this slide about GPU performance, and they showed a Pixel and a Samsung and I think a Huawei, and they showed that the new iPhone 11 basically blew them all out of the water. That blowing them all out of the water isn't just isn't just chips. It's the whole package.
So a while back when I was working on my master's thesis, I made a prediction. This was before the TPU. This was before silicon, before people started making custom chips for custom reasons. And my thing had to do with machine learning on instruction pipelining. And I was like, this is going to become a trend where people are starting to make things like the TPU to make TensorFlow faster and the custom purpose CPUs. And I thought it would be a trend then. That was just probably 6 or 7 years ago before any of this happened. So my only thing I say, like, oh, I predicted the future, just looking at it. And I think it's going to, that trend of owning it yourself, I would be shocked if Microsoft doesn't start doing that for their Xbox division, for their Surface division, because there's no reason they can't. Right. And with Intel being as weak as it is, with its having its recent, struggles to ship, AMD is becoming more prevalent too. I think it's going to become a trend. It's going to pick up speed. It's already a trend, but I think it's going to become a legit thing. And I think Apple's going to help contribute to that quite a bit, just because of what they've shown you can do when you, like you said, you have that tight integration.
Yeah. And we see that with Huawei. With their Kirin processors, they want to do what Apple did. They want to enjoy the benefits of that high degree of integration across the stack, which makes sense.
When do you think they're going to? I mean, with the tariffs, they've already had the scare, but I think the United States signed an agreement to let them still use Android and stuff. I don't know the specifics on that, but with that scare, you think they're going to invest in their own OS? I know Samsung did with Tizen. You think they do the same thing?
I think they will, just for nationalistic reasons. I mean, if you're Chichen Liu, who's his name I just slaughtered. Sorry, everybody who speaks Mandarin. I can't say his name, but he wrote the Three Body Problem series. His work, in a lot of ways, represents a new sort of militant right-wing position within the Chinese polity, and a lot of that is centered around the idea that they shouldn't be a fast follower anymore. They should be the leaders. And so, if you're Huawei, the push to develop your own mobile operating system is a big push, because you learn stuff from it. I mean, there's a nationalistic drive to do it. So yeah, I think that's definitely going to happen.
One thing I want to touch on, you mentioned that they're announced a new processor. I think this is A13, right? But from a user perspective, explain a little bit more. You have A12, I think X, and A13. I mean, how does that affect the user? And and also what Apple's trying to do.
I don't know that it affects the user so much as it gives them product stratification. By now the profit margins on the A10 are pretty high. So there's a lot of justification to keep those devices out there and to lower their prices and maybe sell more of them. But for a customer, especially the newest chip, the biggest thing that does is it lets you do things like, with the crazy 4 cameras on the iPhone 11 Pro Max, you can shoot 4K video across a very wide depth of field and take pictures and edit them all on your phone. Like, you don't even need an iPad anymore. Like, you can do all that image creation activities directly on your phone, and not kill your battery. So if you do that a lot, that phone's very very attractive. That's the biggest impact that the user will see, is you have suddenly all this performance.
Did they say how much that phone is?
It's like $1,000, I think.
Oh, I was like $5,000 for that thing, maybe.
No, I think if you get I don't know what that's for the 64 meg. They're still playing a lot of games with their memory. Like, if you want the 128, you're going to be paying some bucks for that. But the 64 seemed like it was reasonable. So the iPhone, pre-order. So view pricing. The lowest end one is like $699, and that's without trade-in. They really want people to trade in their old phones and to go for this monthly model. So it could be $25 a month or $50 a month.
They want those sweet, sweet SaaS contracts, man.
Yeah, I mean, they're rent seeking. So the iPhone 11 Pro Max in space gray with 512 gigs of RAM of storage is $1,500 or $60 a month.
They're actually someone did the math on Reddit. It was like $97 to be all in on the Apple ecosystem. That's two terabytes of iCloud space, Apple TV Plus, Apple Music, Apple News, and a few other things in there. All their services combined, and then the along with an iPhone subscription. So it's about $100 a month if you go all in subscription model with Apple, which isn't absurd. I mean, I think it is, but it's not the worst on the planet in terms of pricing.
One other thing they introduced yesterday was the iPad OS. And so now you have iOS 13, the iPad OS, TV OS, Mac. I don't know what the latest one in Mac is. And then you have the, I guess, and then I guess Apple Watch. So you have multiple now OSs, and what they do a great job of is making sure that's almost like a unified experience, and they're all updated at the same time. This is something that Android, for some reason, just has never figured out. And you may get Android phones that 9 months after the latest build comes out, you still don't have it, and then sometimes they discontinue it. So I find that that's one of the really cool things that they've done over time.
Yeah, not to defend Android in this case, but one of the things that Google has done is they've moved a lot of the functionality into Google Play services, and so the version of Android you're running has become less and less important. So most of the phones now, no matter what you're running, most of the functionalities provided by Play services, and so they don't care. But for Apple, the multiple OSs is it's a boon for the developer. Because you can access very specific functional tools within their APIs to deploy to the different things, and like tvOS, you can write a tvOS app.
Anything? Go ahead.
You can write a tvOS app using TVML, and it's the easiest thing in the world. Like tvOS apps can run the range of being ludicrously simple to just crazy land hard. And watchOS, it's a constrained environment. You got to constrain people there. iPad OS, I think that's good. A lot of people want to treat their iPad like it's a computer. And some of the limitations of iOS were really getting in the way. But I think it's good. I look forward to iPad OS. I look forward to updating my iPad Pro to iPad OS and getting the benefits there.
So one thing that I see them doing, I think people have it wrong, where they think Apple's going after the Surface market with their iPad OS and keyboard-focused applications. And I actually think that's the wrong way of looking at it. I think they're going after the Chromebook market. You do 4 things because you browse the internet, you edit documents, and you send messages. And if that's all you do, and that's what 80% of people do on their computers, you can get a Chromebook for $400, and it's great. It's a great little machine. And then if you could do the same thing on an iPad, people might want to stay within the ecosystem. I don't think you can compete with a full operating system like on the Surface. I mean, maybe you could for some people, but for the majority of people that want the full OS experience, they're not even looking at Chromebooks. But I think iPad could be a real competitor to that market of limited usage, same ecosystem, friendly UI, consumer.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They're feeling the heat. I don't think anybody's feeling any competitive pressure from Microsoft Surface.
No,
They're pretty expensive. They're they're not as they're a different kind of device in a lot of ways, but iPads are definitely feeling the heat from Chromebooks and from businesses. I mean, a lot of businesses really could replace almost all their employees' computing needs with an iPad if it had a couple of other things. And now they can.
What are those other things?
So the single app at a time thing is a problem for a lot of business applications. So the side-by-side view was okay in iOS, but you really need a more robust multi-application story for business apps, because what happens is people have their email open and a spreadsheet, or a presentation and their email, or a presentation and a spreadsheet, and they're going back and forth between those two applications. That application to application interplay is a big deal for Office users. And I don't mean like Microsoft Office users, but I mean like your average person who's working an office job. Those are things that matter to them. And now you'll be able to do it. You'll be able to do all that. You'll be able to have seamless interaction between applications. You'll be able to, drag and dropping and cut and pasting and stuff like that was kind of cumbersome in iOS, and it's way better in iPad OS.
Hey man, it only took 12 years to get tiling in OS X. So like, hey, when they have tiling on the iPad, it might be okay. You might be able to do some real stuff with it. Although I have my iPad Pro SSH'd into a box and fixed a production bug before, because I have the keyboard on it, and it's not bad. As long as I store my my SSH keys on my my iCloud, I'm good to go for development on that box. I can just use Vim and go to town.
Yeah, it works quite well. I wish they had a better story on YubiKey support. But
that would be great, because I don't like my SSH keys or any of my private stuff on iCloud. It's just a way of sharing it among my computers, so I don't have this one computer having something my other computer doesn't, because I switch between my desktop and my laptop a lot. And so if they had YubiKey support, that'd be even better, because then I don't have to store those keys anywhere. I could just store my source on iCloud and sync it across.
Yeah, I haven't tried the USB-C YubiKey with. It'll be once iPad OS comes out, I'll have to give that a shot, see how that works. But yeah, I mean, and security, the iCloud's okay. I mean, there are depending on which SSH app you use, you can store the keys locally, and that's not so bad. But the security is generally quite good. And security in the applications are quite good. So
you can be one of the first to download our podcast and read our latest articles each week by subscribing to the Thoughtful Software newsletter. Sign up today and receive a free copy of Andrew's ebook, Thoughtful Software Principles. This is a treasure trove of software wisdom you won't find anywhere else. In this free resource, Andrew dives into details on how to build really great software. You can go to skiplist.com to subscribe, and we'll immediately send you a download link. That's skiplist.com. Now, back to the show.
You guys mentioned just development and around in the Apple ecosystem. Did you see anything from yesterday's announcement that changes anything for developers, or is there anything exciting or anything new from like Swift or anything you saw from yesterday?
There wasn't anything from yesterday. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe for developers. I mean, the biggest is Swift UI and a data, I don't know what to call it, called Combine, that really definitely looks like it's going to change the way application developers do their work. That's pretty exciting. And Swift's a good language for that, and the integration with their ecosystem is really good. So I haven't seen anything. The ABI stability in the new Swift is probably the biggest thing, and that's what people have been waiting for a long time. Because if you have C++ applications, you want that so that you don't have to recompile everything all the time. And there's a lot of C++ out in the world. But no, I didn't see anything yesterday on the developer side. It was mostly product focused.
The Metal API, I've heard rumors from some of my more data sciencey friends that TensorFlow might be gaining support because the Metal API changes that they're doing, which will give you great speed ups on the Mac Pro and their religious fascination with Radeon, even though I believe NVIDIA has won this war already. But have you heard anything about that?
So NVIDIA hasn't won, but I've got an AMD eGPU on my desk here, so maybe I'm the wrong guy to comment on that. I suspect that TensorFlow will get Metal support, and CoreML 3 offers a lot of it. Turi Create already supports AMD and the Metal computational API on macOS. So there's already an accelerated machine learning story on macOS. It's just not a lot of people use Turi Create. Yeah, I definitely think that there's going to be more support for it, especially once the new Mac Pros come out. Because one of the things the new Mac Pros have is a PCI-based FPGA, and I think there's going to be a lot of people wanting to try to do weird stuff with that.
Yep.
But no, I find the AMD GPUs to be quite good. I mean, I wish there was CUDA support, and my preferred package for NLP stuff on at least Neural is PyTorch, and PyTorch isn't going to get Metal support. It's CUDA or death on PyTorch. So
yeah, well, that's the biggest thing is CUDA. For the listeners who don't know what CUDA is the programming interface to NVIDIA GPUs. It allows you to basically, I could write CUDA in C because that was the first language. I think there's CUDA Python now, but never looked into it. And it allows you to write an instruction, write code that executes against the GPU, seemingly native, but it's going against the GPU. And so I think if I was Radeon, I would want to find out how I can cross compile to provide a CUDA type interface that interfaces with my GPU. I don't know if they can because of licensing or whatever, but it might be a competitive advantage for them. And that's why I say they've kind of lost. Not from a gaming perspective, I think Radeon does better because they tend to do a lot with their Steam processors and things like that help game performance. But I think from a professional standpoint of who's won the everyone does stuff on my card, and I think that's definitely NVIDIA, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I like competition, so.
No, I do too. And CUDA's been way easier to use. OpenCL, you could always use OpenCL, but that was never all that popular. AMD's got their own thing that's CUDA for AMD, but I've never used it because most of the packages, there's good CUDA support. It's hard to do other stuff. I mean, like I said, I use PyTorch. A lot of times when people are publishing papers from Facebook research, they'll include PyTorch code, and it already works on CUDA. If you follow the happy path on your config, you can execute all the code from the paper and go along, and it's great. There's not a lot of desire to rock the boat, at least not for me, on that kind of stuff. Mm. I just wish I use AMD because NVIDIA isn't supported on Mac OS. So
why is that, do you think, or do you know?
I have no idea.
I gotta imagine it's competitive. I can't see any reason why they can't install the drivers. They have a Unix kernel, and they have hundreds of $1 billion. They can pay NVIDIA $1 billion to write them a driver, and it'd be 1% of their cash. Yeah. It seems odd to me. I'm going to look that up later.
And there have been MacBooks that shipped with discrete NVIDIA graphics cards in the past. I mean, I don't know. There's your Tim Cook question right there. It's probably related to, Apple's got pretty stringent requirements on how you play with them if you want to play with them. And it's entirely possible NVIDIA just didn't want to play ball and AMD would, because Apple doesn't care. They'll do what Apple wants to do, whether or not you want to cooperate with them or not.
Interesting. You think then they would be running AMD or like, because AMD up until recently has really been struggling. They could have probably bent them over and took them to town with pretty much anything. They could be like, hey, we'll save you. Here's what we want, and got what they wanted out of AMD instead of going to Intel, which they have a lot less power over given Intel size.
Yeah, but Intel also has fabs and lots of them.
True.
And so Intel can guarantee them their chips.
Good point.
AMD can't do that. And that's really what Apple cares about. Like you have to, and because I don't know where Apple's silicon is fabbed, but it's probably Intel fabs. So their relationship with Intel is more than just processors.
Oh yeah, well they bought their modem company recently, so that's
an interesting one too, because it'll be interesting to see how 5G comes to iPhone, if it does in the States at least.
Let's switch this up and talk about my favorite part of yesterday, which was gaming and Apple Arcade. I really liked it. For $5 a month, I can play hundreds of games. It's kind of like me at a buffet. And I was like, this is going to be awesome. I'm not sure of the gaming quality, but it looks kind of interesting. What were your thoughts around that, Apple Arcade?
I think it's just another way that the AAA studios are going to shovel crapware out and people are going to take it. I'm deeply, deeply, meanly cynical about the game industry, so we should preference everything I say about that. No, I'm not.
Why are you so cynical? Let's start there.
Well, because I used to work in the industry.
Okay. We don't want to bring those memories up.
Yeah, thank you. But no, I think that, I mean, this is a subscription solution to a problem that Apple created, which is in-app purchases, and creating a set of incentives for developers to write games that use in-app purchases. And then people get tired of in-app purchases because it's a pain, and they say, well, we'll take away the pain of in-app purchases with a subscription model. And what? So it's $4.99 a month. How much do you think you could make as an indie dev studio on Apple Arcade?
I don't know the metrics around that, but it's like pennies maybe.
Yeah, pennies per user.
Even if it's pennies per user, how many users are they going to have? Like, I don't think it's pennies per user. I think it's less than that, because it's got to be allocated based on how much they play or something. But no, so it's no small shop is going to have any benefit from Apple Arcade. It's just going to be the big players, and they're going to keep producing the stuff that they produce.
The thing too is you didn't fix the problem. I mean, Fortnite makes $1 billion a month or whatever selling hats or whatever, they skins, silly stuff like that. Like, that's still in-app purchases. League of Legends, again, selling skins, selling characters. I don't think they're not mobile, but same premise, right? Riot Games, they're a AAA. All those things, people are making it off of those small one-off cosmetic purchases, and you didn't get rid of that. I guess you got rid of subscription, but Fortnite didn't have a subscription. It was free to play. And so it's just, I don't know. I don't think it actually fixes the problem for them. I mean, it gets you access to terrible mobile games, and a lot of them, but I don't know. Like, does it save you any money? I doubt it saves the average person any money. And it only, like you said, works to hurt the small studios, who are the ones you want to win. They tend to produce some of the best games. People forget that Blizzard at one point was a small studio and worked its way up to being as success it is today. And the same story for everything, really. Well, we'll see. I see it hurting people. I mean, Activision will make lots of money. That's great.
Well, but I think they're after a different, like market, so their users are, I don't consider them like hardcore gamers. Could be, a lot of teenagers, or could be like parents. I found it interesting that, okay, maybe I can, play a few games. Maybe, like there's a Lego game. I heard Mario Kart might come out on that. So that's like kind of fun for me, but I'm not going to sit there and do any hardcore gaming ever. So I might be a good target market. So, they're just like going after, I think in certain applications or certain, like gaming, for example, is just like kind of good enough. This is okay, good for these certain types of people, but it's not going to replace, any hardcore gaming at all.
No, and I don't think it is, but I think parents is really who they're going for. You don't want your kids to argue about in-app purchases. Here you go, Apple Arcade, play all the games that you want. It's all you can eat. It sounds like a great deal. Done. You can share that with up to 6 family members. So I get it. Maybe I play a couple of games. I mean, the Nintendo and the Switch, I think is a if you care about privacy in gaming and not getting into in-app purchases and stuff like that, Nintendo's Switch and the Switch Lite, is that what it's called? That's got a much better story than any mobile gaming does.
Is there anything underneath, like from the delivery standpoint? Like I think it's called Stadia, Google's
their
gaming
thing.
It's like, it's all cloud based. Is the arcade this very similar setup?
No, the big difference between arcade and Stadia is that Stadia has a boatload of GPUs and high-end computers somewhere and is streaming the game to you. So, and it's for AAA, like hardcore gamers titles. Stadia, not casual mobile games.
Stadia has an interesting problem of streaming games over the internet in a way that's still playable at 60 FPS. It's very few people. A lot of people have tried this because wouldn't it be great to pay $50 and have access to everything? Sony tried it too, and I think Xbox and Sony are partnering to make a gaming cloud system because that's how hard it is. Mobile games is just saying, hey, if you click this, you automatically have subscriptions to all of these. There's probably some changes on the app side where when you hit subscribe, it just shows that you have the subscription already on your account when you sign into your Apple account.
Let's touch on another thing that might be related, is the AR. I don't think they discussed that too much yesterday. I'm trying to figure out like how I would use that with, just my day-to-day. And I haven't figured that out yet. Have you guys figured that out?
No. I think, I think the AR story that Apple's got right now is not a very good one. The use cases are all pretty weak, and they're still thrashing around trying to find. It's a solution in search of a problem, really. Like, what problem am I really solving with augmented reality? And maybe if they come up with a pair of glasses, but for the most part, it's a parlor trick.
No, you're solving the problem of Apple not having enough money. That's the problem you're solving.
$1,500 for the iPhone Pro 11 Max seems like it's solving that problem quite nicely.
I can't get over that name. That name's so terrible. There's nothing elegant about that name.
No, but I vowed I was an early serious critic of the iPad and its name. I learned my lesson. I will never again criticize too harshly Apple's names because I was so wrong on the iPad. So wrong. So who knows? Maybe the iPhone 12 Super Max Espresso Edition S will be even better. But
I will line up for that one. I'll still buy it. I don't care. I think that's my big takeaway from yesterday is they didn't do anything to, make me look at anything else. Like I'm not looking at Android for any reason. And they're just like making their base just even, just more dedicated to what they're doing and more into their ecosystem. And they're just going to keep doing that. And they have such a large user base. They don't need to really shake things up. It's just keep it strong, keep it going, add, really cool features. And then eventually they'll come out with something groundbreaking like 5G support, or maybe like a autonomous car maybe, or something like that. But their base is not moving, and they're just going to continue to do that.
GE thought the same thing, man. Like they dominated everything, and now look at them. You can't sit on your laurels, especially in technology. You can't do it. It's just, as much as people want to say, well, why does Google keep growing? Why are they pushing? Why is Microsoft still pushing? And it's because people come. It's easier than ever to disrupt a company like Apple because of just the proliferation of technology. And while they may have not lost any users yesterday, that doesn't mean Google isn't stealing them. Right. And they practically the same mindset's the reason they lost in India. There's other reasons they lost in India too, but that's one of them. Like, oh, we have these users over here, we're good. But what happens when China kicks them out? What happens if other countries start putting tariffs on Apple goods because of the fact that they're dodging taxes in the EU? Right? These are real possibilities for them because it's not like they made too many friends either. And so I don't know. I think they have to innovate. I don't like the GE mentality of, oh, we run manufacturing everywhere. We're one of the most important companies in history. We don't have to do anything. Well, okay, cool, but I don't have a GE fridge or anything. I have no GE appliances. And so, but at one point they were one of the biggest appliance manufacturers in the world. And they're going to continue losing market share for that same mentality.
Yeah. My question for you, Fahad, is what would Apple have to do to make you look at an Android device?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, but I mean, if you look at one of the things that I did for many years on an iPhone was I would download Spotify because they didn't have any music service. I would use third-party note-taking apps because Notes wasn't that great. I would use other like Flipboard because they didn't have a great news app. So I was on whatever device, but using something else. So now they're using mostly Apple products, whether it's subscription service or it's their hardware. So I'm more into what they're trying to do, and they're trying to capture all this like app ecosystem. But beyond that, I don't really see it because, like I said, again, most people just need to kind of take notes, check their news, check a couple of email. And for the most part, they're just doing a great job. I don't see much that's going to change in the smartphone space for me to say like, okay, I need to, completely dump this and change.
Yeah. And as people get more intertwined, like if you're subscribing to Apple TV Plus and Apple Arcade and Apple News, you can't leave. Like all your music, what are you going to take all your music to Android? That's not going to happen.
Well, they have Apple Music on Android still.
They do have Apple Music, but they don't have iTunes.
True. I actually think that the answer isn't that Apple's going to do anything to make you switch. I think Android can do stuff. They can innovate, right? What if Android comes out with a killer feature that you can't live without? Let's say it automatically does sales follow-ups for you, Fahad, like the new Gmail. Wouldn't you switch to that? I mean, I would. It's the worst part of my day.
Yeah, maybe for Gmail, but you're right. Again, I still think very hard about like when the Pixel came out and that awesome camera, and I saw my friends, they're like taking pictures at parties. I'm like, damn, that's much better than what I got. But then you're like, wait a minute, okay, everybody I know has FaceTime and iMessage, and it just works well. For camera, do I want to switch and be the only guy that doesn't have an iPhone? I was like, nah. It was just like a 30-second thought that I had, and I went on by my business.
a camera isn't a game changer. I'm talking about a true game changing feature that they're focusing on that would actually move the needle for people. For example, let's say that automated assistant thing that called and scheduled a haircut appointment, the really creepy one that I think came out as spoofed or something, or one another that Google did 2 years ago. What if that was an Android only feature? But now you never have to call and do your doctor's appointments anymore or anything like that. And that was only on Android. I don't know. It convinced me to switch over. And so
No, that's a great point.
and that's why I think that cameras don't do it for people. No one's going to switch because of a camera. I don't know if Google knows that, but I certainly know that. But there will eventually be, if they sit idle, someone will come up with something that people can't help but switch over to. And that's when you start losing market share. They're sticky, and the more services you have subscribed, the more sticky they are in your life. But no one's truly that sticky, right? Not when there's something that can be life transforming for people.
I don't know. I think the killer feature's already been shipped. It's the phone without a keyboard. It's the computer in your pocket. I think that's one of the reasons why Microsoft failed with Windows Phone, because I used the Windows. So I have a bunch of phones. I've used everything, and I even bought a Windows Phone, and Windows Phone was a great phone. Like the Nokia that I had with Windows Phone on it was a great phone. The thing is, what I want is a computer in my pocket, not a phone. And that's where Windows Phone failed, for me at least, was that it wasn't a very good computer. But Apple, it's a great computer.
Yep.
And I don't think the killer feature of slightly better computer is going to drive anybody. I mean, I think right now the market's mostly stratifying on price. That if you've got money, you've got an iPhone, and if you don't, you've got an Android.
Yeah, I would say maybe that's a good point. Like on Microsoft, I would say one thing that I find interesting, or that I think about, is what I need to do on my phone, like the work that we use Office 365 here. I'm not using Keynote or anything like that. So if somebody said, "Here's a device that'll help you work better," that might be something interesting to look at.
Yeah, and Microsoft has pushed a lot of stuff into the Android ecosystem. They've got an Android launcher. All the Office stuff is there, and it all works great. Microsoft on Android is definitely a thing.
Let's wrap up with kind of a final thought on what you see as exciting, or anything that's upcoming. Could be around Apple, or just what we've talked about today. What excites you that's upcoming
In mobile computing?
Yeah, mobile computing. Just from the announcement yesterday, just kind of what's on your radar.
The biggest thing that's on my radar recently is the shift of ML and AI applications that are pushing out to the edges. So Core ML on iOS and TensorFlow Lite for Android are pushing machine learning models closer and closer to the data. And as we get closer and closer, that makes our phones more like robots than computers, because they have sensors. The only thing they're missing is mobility. But it's a computer with a sensor and a bit of intelligence. The distributed intelligence potentials that I see in mobile AI is I think going to be a very interesting world. Almost like Her, with not as good of voice actors, but that's the biggest thing. And that's, we're just getting started with that. We're just scratching the surface. Right now it's mostly tricks, like it can recognize you and your family, but it can't do things like what we'll be able to do in the future is, you mostly take pictures with this person and not with this person. Do you want to take pictures? I see that you're next to this person. Would you like to take a picture with them? Or I see that you're close to this person. I'm going to turn off the phone app because I know you don't want to take pictures with them.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff really, really opens up new potentials.
Yeah. One thing I'm interested in, and is like Siri shortcuts. And I don't think they touched on it yesterday. But just that would be interesting to see where they go with that, or if that's even a thing. But I find that fascinating.
Yeah, Siri could be so much more than it is now. But voice interfaces, I think, is going to be the next world.
I actually I agree with you, but I've also a hedge against that in my own head. I'm actually most excited about watches and sensors in general. I think the advancements on Apple Watch, the ability to detect if you're having a potentially irregular heartbeat, potentially a heart attack. I think it's insanity how far that's come along in such a short amount of time. They're talking about reading your blood glucose levels via that device. And I think that my hedge against voice is still interactive. Like I still have to think and ask and act. But I think I want to live in a world where my computing knows enough about me, knows my heart rate, and knows all this stuff to start telling me things, right? And so I love the idea of having an AirPod in and my watch saying, "Hey, Andrew, calm the fuck down. Your blood pressure spiking," and saying, "Oh, you're right. I should take a breath," and it, helping me and guiding me along and catching things that I normally don't catch. I think that could be, it's still voice, but it's the computer telling me things and not necessarily me telling the computer things. And I think you're right, Josh, because that's going to be very difficult to do. But if they can, take that and have the computer interact with you via data and sensors, I think that is a game changer. I think that's the next revolution in computing. AI plus human beings being better together. And the first company to get that right. And I think Apple has the entire ecosystem with their AirPods and their Apple Watch and the iPhone to get it right.
Yeah. Google's pretty far behind on that too, which is kind of funny because AirPods are fabulous and the Google ear things are not.
Yeah. Well, that again, you talk about Tim Cook and silicon. They couldn't have possibly done that without their own custom silicon that they put in the AirPods, their custom Bluetooth chips and all of that, which Tim Cook, with his supply chain genius, enabled, maybe inadvertently or maybe on purpose, who knows. But certainly AirPods are some of the best devices released in the last 30 years, and they're just getting better. Next set's supposedly going to have a heart beat monitor in it, and they're already waterproof. They're some of the best devices I own.
I think we can be pretty safe in assuming that Tim Cook doesn't do anything without having it calculated out to 5 digits.
True.
I think that's a good place to end. And I thought it was a fascinating conversation. So thank you, Josh. We should do this again.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. You can always connect with us at skiplist.com.